We lived in a house that was haunted when I was a kid, and I saw a grown man appear and disappear. The only thing I could really make out was that he was wearing plaid pants. My uncle had an experience where a little girl asked him to come inside through the window to play. He thought it was my sister and didn't think much of it, but it turned out my sister wasn't home that day. There was nobody it could have realistically been. There was always a weird feeling in my sister's room. When you walk into the room, everything just feels unnaturally still. Like no sound, no movement in the air, no nothing. Everything was stagnant. You know how you have a sixth sense if someone is watching you. That's how it felt like, coupled with the complete absence of life. I used to have a reoccurring nightmare where I would walk in that room and something spooky would happen. The first time, it was a doll that stood in the center of the room and whispered the words red polka dots over and over again. The supernatural spooky thing would vary, but it was always in that room. I was walking through a park with a friend at night and had a feeling like I was being followed. I turned around to see a shadow figure with bright white eyes walking behind us. We screamed and ran out of the park and up along the road parallel to it. I glanced right and it was keeping pace with us sprinting, its stare fixed on us, but looked like it was just walking. I am generally quite skeptical, but cannot explain that at all.
This is Dead Air, and stories about the scariest things people have ever seen that they can't explain.
In my first apartment, a shadowy person would come out of one bedroom, cross the hall, and go into the bathroom. I once saw it 3 times on the same night. My roommates saw the same thing, and some people who came to visit saw it too. It never did anything else or went anywhere else in the apartment. Just crossed the hall into the bathroom again and again. I went by a few years ago and the building had been torn down. An office building stands there now. Wonder what happened to it. One night when I was a kid, my buddy and I were running away from something we'd done, and a lady in a long white dress was in the field next to us keeping pace with us, but she was just floating along. I couldn't see her feet. On that property was an old plantation-looking mansion-type house. One night at work was creepy. It was shortly after we lost a whole slew of patients to COVID-19. One unit was completely empty. A call light went off on the empty unit where the COVID-19 patients had been. Because my place hadn't hired one security guard or installed any security cameras, one nurse asked me, "Are you brave?" while I was just passing out the ice water. I mumbled, "Yes, what's wrong?" She said, "Please check out that call light. A ghost is setting it off." I asked her, "What if it ain't a ghost?" She mumbled, "We are right behind you." I opened the door. There was no one. I checked under the 2 hospital beds, in the patient's bathroom and the closet. Then I turned off the call light and informed my nurse there was no one. According to her, it was a ghost. As I proceeded off the unit, the call light went back on. I went back and shut it off, and it continued like that 5 times. The night before my birthday a few years back, I was getting ready for bed when I started to get this sinking feeling in my stomach, like something was very wrong. I tried to brush it off, but I was definitely on high alert when I climbed into bed. I was restless. couldn't fall asleep, and I attributed it to being excited by the day I had lined up tomorrow. Eventually, I settled a bit, but I tossed and turned most of the night, and had some very, very weird dreams in which my grandpa was trying to talk to me, but I couldn't quite understand him. I remember bits and pieces of the dreams because they were weird, but some parts have faded at this point. I remember my mom being really upset in one of them, sobbing hysterically, and I remember seeing my grandma as well, even though she had passed away a couple of years earlier. Eventually, the next morning, I woke up, and when I walked out of my room, I ran into my mom in the hallway. I was expecting her to greet me with excitement. She always made a big deal about birthdays, but her eyes were puffy and red. She leaned in and gave me a big hug and said, "I'm sorry to do this on your birthday, but we got a phone call early this morning. Your grandpa died last night. He passed away in his sleep." When I was 5, we moved into an old farmhouse. My room was the biggest and the only one with a closet in it. It was a walk-in with a tiny window near the ceiling, not big enough for anyone to fit through. It also had no door, just an open doorway that faced my bed. I can only assume my mom had never seen a horror movie in her life up to that point or something. I have ADHD, and I was one of those kids that never slept. I was quietly playing with toys on the bed when I got the distinct feeling I was being watched. I looked up and saw what I can only describe as a shadow person that was a darker shade of black than the dark closet behind it. The eyes were red. Obviously, I was terrified. I froze in place until it put a hand on the outside of the closet like it was feeling for the light switch. Then I bolted and ran to my parents. My stepdad went through the whole place thinking there was an intruder, but there wasn't. I still remember it so vividly to this day, and I'm now 38. We were living in a big ranch house in Central Florida on about 4 acres of swampy farmland. I was very stressed and just not sleeping well at all. One night, I was startled awake. I was laying on my left side. I opened my eyes and I saw a black silhouette standing right next to my bed, less than a foot from my face. It was the size and shape of a little girl, I'd say about 5 to 6 years old. I gasped, and the silhouette seemed to startle as well, and slipped under my bed, like a dropped sheet of paper, just whoosh, right under the bed. Spent a solid minute paralyzed with fear, just asking myself over and over, did I just see that? Did I just see that? In my head. My best friend and I would always talk about crazy dreams we had. Never thought much of it until he told me about one where he got hit by a car and died. We were about 15 or 16 when he told me about the dream. We were into conspiracies, stuff like aliens, the paranormal and lucid dreaming, so we'd talk about stuff like that a lot. And he died right before he would have turned 20. He said he was riding a skateboard wearing all black when the car hit him, and that he could see everyone at his funeral. He even said his crush was at his funeral and laughed about it. He just kept going on about how it was so real, and it really shook me up until eventually I forgot about it. Then a few years later, after I'd long forgotten about the dream he told me about, it happened for real. His crush was at his funeral. He did get hit by a car and die. He was wearing all black like in the dream, his work clothes, and he was riding my skateboard. It was all true. I still don't know what to make of it all. Every single detail I remember from his dream came true, and I'm sure there are parts of it he told me that I don't remember. I felt crazy. I didn't tell anyone about it. I just don't know why or how he saw it happen in his dream. And I think, what if he never told me about it? It just left me with so many questions. But I guess now I have proof, at least for myself, that our souls go on after we die. I just wish I knew why he experienced that dream and told me about it, like there had to be some kind of reason. I just think about how I wouldn't believe this story if I hadn't experienced it for myself. I bought my grandparents' house after they had passed. Everyone in my family has had some kind of weird experience there, but we all agree that it's a friendly ghost. Well, my girlfriend moved in with me even though I didn't want that. The alternative was that she be homeless, though. The experiences I've had are things like feeling someone sit down at the end of the bed when I'm asleep, even feeling like someone tucked me in once or twice. Sometimes I'll hear someone walking around and feel like I can just barely see them at the edge of my vision. My girlfriend, on the other hand, she says when she first moved in, there was a night she didn't sleep at all. She said she could clearly hear someone walking around our bed, stopping by her head, and she'd feel watched. Or a couple of times she claims she's been in the bathroom when home alone and can see the light blocked coming in the bottom of the door, like someone is standing right outside the door. I don't think the ghost likes her. I work in a historic building built on an even older settlement, and 2 separate occasions I'm fairly certain I've seen a ghost. First time I saw a young man in uniform reflected in a window that is very, very far up and couldn't possibly be an actual person in or out of the building. Like a year later, a colleague told me about how a few people over the years have spotted a young man in a uniform over that side of the building, and I had never told them what I had seen. The second time I bent down as my colleague walked back into the room, and when I looked up, there was nobody there. But someone definitely walked into that room. I've had 2 precognitions of doom that have come true. The first one was over a decade before the second. At a friend's house for a party, I looked at her dog and its face became like a skull. I had been drinking, but not crazy drunk drinking. It was a pretty clear, unmistakable skull. I didn't say anything to anyone because why would I? Less than an hour later, the dog was dead. It escaped through a door in a fence that someone left open and was killed by traffic on the road. The other one was just a few years ago. I left a friend's house in my car alone. A few minutes into my trip, I started having intrusive, strong thoughts about being in a head-on collision. The little details, like the dashboard being shoved into my face and the whole lower part of my face being mangled, the glass everywhere. Somehow I knew the car that hit me would cross the center line, and this accident would mangle me, if not kill me. It's funny how a person can drive for over 30 years and not ever really think about cars randomly crossing the center line. But on this day, at this time, my brain was suddenly obsessed with it. On a stretch of 2-lane highway, about 3 or 4 minutes of driving later, an SUV drifted across the center lane right in front of me. I was completely ready for it and swerved neatly out of the way, but not off the road. 10 years ago, I was catching the bus home from work. The route goes past a large hospital, and the hospital stop is a long one with a lot of people getting off and on. I hadn't taken this particular route for a while, and during the wait time looked up towards the roof of the hospital. There are helicopters and stuff, and it's a tall building. I was bored. Anyway, there was a figure on one of the rooftops, which was weird. Rake-thin, scarecrow-like, long black hair flowing in the wind, looking down at the bus, at me. I turned back, weirded out, and back to my phone. I suddenly got a prickly feeling and glanced out the window where the people were getting on off the bus, and the skinny scarecrow woman was right at the window, black hair, staring at me. The same one that was stories up seconds ago. Nightmare into sleep paralysis. Was being chased by aliens that could turn invisible in my dream. My brain likened it to the movie Dark Skies. Anyways, terrifying nightmare. Wake up. My room's lit by a red light on low. They are standing over my bed. I'm freaking out, and when I'm finally able to move, I'm so overwhelmed because my logical brain is like, this ain't real, but my body is screaming at me that it is. I'm able to move my arms, and I cover my face, telling my partner to turn on her flashlight now. She does. Nothing is in the room, but they could go invisible, remember? This is what my brain tells me. I spend 30 minutes terrified. Eventually I go to the bathroom because I have to pee really bad. I step back out of the bathroom, and there's one standing at the bottom of my stairs. I wish I was making this up, truly. I ran back to my room and was terrified for an hour until I fell asleep. I was at a local Halloween event next to a forest said to be haunted because of an Indian massacre that happened on that land. Well, my friends and I ventured off from the event to look at the actual marker where this took place. It was dark, and we basically walked like 200 yards away from everyone to go look at a gravestone. Saw the marker, nothing really special, just a small plaque stating briefly the tragic events that happened. Well, on the way back, one of my friends who was walking behind us started screaming and running ahead of us. As I look back, I see this shadow-like blob scurry from behind one tree to behind another. It was probably the size of a dog, but looked like someone in a cloak crouching all the way down and somehow moving forward like that. Can't explain it well, but we ran back to the event. Afterwards, one of my friends found an outline of a face in the picture he took of the marker. My son, 24 at the time, saw an adult-sized silhouette in the kitchen. He got up in the middle of the night for water, not bothering to turn on any lights. He came down the hall and turned the corner into the kitchen. The fridge was right at the corner, and it was standing right in front of the fridge. He said it seemed to be reaching out to him, scared him so bad he dropped his cup, ran back to his room and locked himself in. I had a stillborn daughter years back, so I thought for a while maybe what I saw was her, which made me really sad. But in time, I found out the property we were living on was also very close to one of the earliest European settlements in central Florida. The settlers had been fighting with some of the indigenous Seminole people in the area. Apparently, 2 of the family's children, a boy and a girl, were killed and buried somewhere in that area in unmarked graves. Gave me the straight-up willies when I found that out. Lots of bad juju around there. We were happy to move. I was living with my mother and sister during my high school years. It was a decent flat on the 3rd story. During that time, I pretty often heard my name called when no one was around. It was also strange that these cases happened only in one room, which was my bedroom then. I remember one time crystal clear. It was during summer break. I slept through the morning and it was around 10 or 11 a.m. when I was woken up by my mother calling my name directly standing next to me. Or at least I thought she was. When I woke up, I realized I was alone, not only in my room, but in the whole flat. Also, during that time, I slept behind locked doors because of paranoia. I can remember a second case too, when I was listening to music and heard someone clearly calling my name next to me. Next to me was the half-opened window, and to remind you, we were on the 3rd floor. I'm honestly not sure if that was something paranormal or I was just hallucinating. I was in pretty deep depression during my high school years, so it might have happened somehow because of that. Anyway, since I moved from that place, I have never experienced this again. Growing up, we always had what we just assumed was a ghost follow us from place to place as we moved a lot when I was a child. It never seemed like its intentions were malicious, but it did seem territorial and didn't like being called fake, as most activity happened when a guest was over. Once, when my cousin was watching me while my parents were gone, a friend I was telling her of past stories, and she brushed it off, saying, "Ghosts aren't real." During the conversation in the middle of broad daylight while sitting in our living room, a friend of mine knocked on the storm door, asking if I could come play. As my cousin got up to answer, the main wooden door slammed in her face right before she got to it, and the deadbolt and door locked. She was so terrified she called my parents crying and begged them to come back. Another was at a different house, but again when someone new was around. My girlfriend and I were laying on my bed with my 2 brothers while they played with my iPod, and me and her talked. It was her first time at the house, and I had told her of past experiences which she thought was silly. Nothing had happened that was weird, so I asked if she thought I was lying, and she replied, yes, jokingly. Less than 5 seconds later, my bedroom door slammed shut. The ceiling fan started turning on and off. Several things I had laying on my nightstand flew across the room against the door that slammed, and the doors to my dresser started slamming shut over and over again. This is by far the most aggressive thing it ever did, and all 3 of them were screaming bloody murder and crying. My best friend in middle school had just moved into the neighborhood, and his house was previously owned by an old woman that died in the house. One night, I was sleeping over at his house, and I woke in the middle of the night to get a glass of water. As I walked out of his bedroom, I entered a long hallway that leads to the living/dining/kitchen area. All of the lights in the house were off, except the kitchen light. From my viewpoint, I couldn't see the kitchen directly, but there were framed pictures lining the hallway walls, and indirectly, the glass panes were illuminated from the kitchen light, and I could see the kitchen in the reflection. In one of the panes, I saw a woman in a robe standing in front of the stove. She had her back to me, and I couldn't see her face, but I saw that there was steam billowing from her figure. like she was standing in front of the stove, perhaps boiling a pot of tea. My friend's mom drank lots of tea, so I thought it was her. But I rounded the corner to enter the kitchen and there was nobody there. I'm about 99% certain I saw a ghost. I have no other explanation. In the summer of 2009, my dad took me on vacation to Estes Park, Colorado. I was a pretty big fan of The Shining and of paranormal studies. We stayed there for around 3 days. On the second day, my father walked into the room with a strange look on his face. I asked him what was wrong, and he said, "I just saw a freaking ghost. I was leaving the gym in the basement and I saw a pair of translucent legs walk through the door of an office." My father never lies. He is probably the most honest man I know. The look on his face said everything. We had also signed up for the ghost tour that the building hosts on a daily basis. While we were exploring the basement area, my dad's camera, which had recently been fully charged, had lost power. My dad told the tour guide, who replied, "Yeah, that happens pretty often down here." Later that night, we were watching ghost hunters in our room on the second floor. My dad had decided to have an impromptu investigation. We had turned the lights off and asked if there were any spirits in here, if they could knock on something. A couple of seconds afterwards, we heard something akin to a knock on the wall. My father then asked if there are any spirits here, if they could reveal themselves. Then the unthinkable happened. A misty figure manifested in the corner of the room. It took the shape of a person and stayed in the corner. I was truly astonished. I had a couple of weird experiences where I thought I heard my name being whispered when no one was there at one of our older homes, and I'd heard family tell ghost stories, etc., but nothing on this level. I darted out of our room and called my mom, explaining to her what happened. She tried to calm me down, but I was just shocked that something like this could actually happen. My perception of the world had just been entirely turned on its head. I had believed in ghosts in the past, but never had any major personal experiences. Needless to say, I drank a decent dose of NyQuil that night in order to sleep. Years later, my mom and her mother took a tour of the Stanley Hotel. She took a photo near the staircase where a portrait of the founder hangs. She didn't see it at the time, but there was a bearded apparition in the photo that she later discovered. It's the best ghost photo I've ever seen. My parents lived in an old house, and every night around the same time, 1 a.m., the doorbell would go off, but there was never anyone there. My dad eventually waited to confront whatever it was, and just before 1 a.m. made sure he was standing in front of the door looking out the peephole, hand on the door. 1 a.m. doorbell strikes. Red eyes are staring at him through the peephole. He bursts through, ready to swing, hears rustling in the bushes and chases after it. Couldn't see anything and looks all around the house outside. He goes back inside, satisfied whatever it was gone. Except my mom was doing dishes in the kitchen, totally unfazed, as this was the least of the activity in that house, and called Dad over. There through the window above the sink was a pair of red eyes peeping right at her. There goes Dad tearing out the back again. After the confrontation, it never happened again. 15 years ago, In an apartment my wife and I rented, someone knocked on my hallway closet door from the inside and moved the doorknob back and forth, opened the door to find nobody inside. The other incident was a dark figure standing at the end of our bed one night. Luckily for me, my wife saw both incidents, so I know I'm not crazy. We have moved out of that apartment and haven't had any weird things happen since. Back in the early 2000s, my father, brother, and I decided to try a hunting ground closer to home, so we hired a local guide to show us around this forested region. I remember that it was November because it was whitetail rut season and the forest had a beautiful fresh powder of snow. We traveled back trails and staked out openings with tall sedges, but never came across a whitetail worth taking. The sun was setting low, so we decided to head back. By the time we made it back to the paved highway, it was dark. The sky was clear, stars were out, but there was barely any moonlight. If any of you have been to a dark spot on Earth, you'll know that the sky is so clear, and with no wind, it was really pristine. So as we're driving down this highway, we see lights off in the distance down the road. I assume there has been a car accident and there are emergency vehicles present, as it's not uncommon in winter, especially at night. But these lights are bright, like real bright, to the point where your eyes adjust and the dark surroundings become less visible. So I'm looking at these lights and I think there must be a hill or bend in the road that's preventing me from seeing the emergency vehicles. Everyone in the truck is trying to guess what's going on because the space between where the headlights reach and where these bright flashing lights are, we can't really make out. It turns out there is no hill, there is no bend. The road is straight, and when we get to the point where we thought these lights were no longer there, but instead 200 to 300 yards off the road into the forest, I can only determine that because they are illuminating the trees to be visible. So we stop and we're just looking at them, and these lights are vibrant, like if the contrast was turned up in your eyes. Mentally, I can make out the colors, red and white, flashing. That's why I thought it was an ambulance. My brother swears it's red and blue. My dad sees orange instead of red, and the guide ain't thinking any of that at all. This bitch aims his gun at these lights and says, "Should I shoot it?" Me and my family said, "Fuck that, not a chance." We were there maybe 5 minutes alone on this highway with these lights before other vehicles started showing up and stopping. There was this scene of 6 to 7 vehicles with people climbing out in winter gear, trying to get a better look at what's making these flashing lights. But by the time they are getting settled, the light had become smaller and smaller until they just vanished. We used to camp in the nearby park area, and this was our first time trying to hunt in the region. Since the event, none of us have been back there, and as for the guide, haven't seen or heard from him since. It was a cage-rattling experience. It was the stillness of the night, like the sound of your very breath could set something off. The vibrant, huge lights on the backdrop of the black sky, and the nervousness that comes with the feeling of not being in control. I was 17 and at a Waffle House with 3 friends. We were in a booth and talking when a man walked in. This guy was 40-something, balding, Carhartt jacket, jeans. He looked rough and like he had lived a rough life. He stopped and stared at us for a minute, and all of us looked over at him for a moment. It's like time froze for a second. Then Then he walked quickly and aggressively to the back towards the bathrooms. It was exactly like you described. All of us said the same thing. We knew we had to leave and that it was a matter of life or death. Very primal feeling of fear. We literally threw our waitress $20 each and ran out the door to my car. I remember when we looked back at the restaurant, he was outside and walking towards the car. He looked determined. Anyways, I jumped the curb in my Volvo station wagon and got us the fuck out of there. I was in my room on my computer in the middle of playing Star Wars Galaxies. I was in the middle of a fight when I heard someone turning my bedroom doorknob, rattle it, and try to open my locked door. Assuming it's my mother or brother, I tell them, "Hold on, I'll be right there. What do you want?" The door stops rattling and I can see the shadow under the door move down the hallway towards their rooms. My fight is done in like less than a minute. I get up and go check and there's no one there. I go down the hallway and I'm the only one in the house at all. Mom worked nights. Brother was a teenager with a license. There was no exit from the way the shadow went down the hall, and when I ran outside to look around, there was no one to be seen unless they sprinted across the driveway. I can't explain it. I was at a mall with my small children years ago, and I sat in a bench about 10 feet away from the doors of the two little game stores my son wanted to go into and watched him. I could see the entire store. He was about 7. Then I noticed a man watching him, then following him slowly as he went from the one store into the other one. An overwhelming alarm went off in my head and I knew the guy was a predator. I ran with my other 2 kids who were sitting with me and grabbed him, and we all left the mall. The scariest part, which I will never forget, was the absolute cold urge to kill that guy if I needed to. Like I would have had the ability to do it. I have never experienced anything like it before or since. I was a young mom. In 2002, my band was crammed into a van traveling south between Indianapolis and Lafayette, Indiana. It was raining very hard, and it was summertime around 2 a.m. There is literally nothing except corn and soybean fields on either side of us. On the east side of I-65, about half a mile off the highway, 5 very bright beams of light, like from a search helicopter, all lit up various parts of this field at the exact same time. The lights slowly scanned around for 10 or 15 seconds, then all went out at the same time. The 5 beams were coming from different areas in the sky above the field. We slowed down to get a better look and rolled down the windows to listen for helicopters. I couldn't imagine helicopters flying in that weather, and we didn't hear anything but the rain, but it's the only thing that makes sense. It was pretty freaky in the moment, and it took us a few minutes of reasoning to land on. It probably wasn't aliens from another dimension, but it freaked us all out so much that we decided it would be best to get a hotel instead of driving the rest of the way back to Indianapolis. I was at the Missouri State Penitentiary on a tour, and I took a picture in the gas chamber through a window into a dark room. So basically, in the picture, you could see my reflection and everything behind me. When I got home, I was looking through my pictures and saw that the picture was live. For non-iPhone users, that means if I press and hold it, it will move like a video for a second. So I pressed down, and when the live stopped, there was a man's face directly behind me. An angry-looking face at that. I would have never seen it if the picture hadn't been Liv. The last person to have that picture was my aunt, and she deleted it because she didn't want any negative spirits coming through, lol, so that pic is gone forever, but it was still pretty damn cool and scary. Years ago, I went on a chill camping trip with 2 of my buddies. We went to his grandma's place and camped in tents. We found an abandoned farm nearby with a huge building where they kept animals and got high in it for a week straight. Not throwing anything around or destroying anything, we literally went in, sat on concrete and got high and laughed. After a week, we're talking about paranormal, sitting in the same spot we normally did that had a huge 4-meter or so tall wooden wall beside it, and my friend that used to like to draw pentagrams, light candles in his room, and attempt to summon demons, starts talking about weird stuff happening, like his TV randomly turning on, his drawers being open when he wakes up. The huge wooden door behind us makes a weird noise, so we all instantly jump away because we were in a paranoid mood. After listening to him, luckily, LOL, and the door falls to the floor just behind him when we jumped away. Probably a second later he would have gotten hit. Creeped the fuck out of me. Ironically, after a solid year of smoking with this specific guy, pretty much every night I told him I feel like we're gonna wreck our futures if we keep it up, and that I was stopping. He didn't want to stop, so we stopped hanging around. 6 years later, I heard he was doing coke and was basically a skeleton. 7 years later, he was in jail for reasons we never found out and had legally changed his name to Lucifer Morningstar, that is to the devil's name, and was involved in some Satan-worshipping cult in our city. Blows my mind how people can spiral like that, lol. Driving home late one night, I saw what looked like a person standing on the side of the road with no face and no movement, just standing. When my headlights hit them, they vanished, just gone. I stopped the car, looked around, and there was nobody, not even a footprint. I was young and woke up to a naked woman standing at my door, glaring at me, long hair and missing her lower jaw, blood all down her front, with a weird bone necklace, but her eyes glaring at me. I couldn't scream or move, and she approached, eyes locked on mine and full of malice. I passed out with her eyes inches away from me. I can remember the feeble gasps I was making in fear. I'm pretty sure it was sleep paralysis. The weird thing about it is that it was like 30-odd years ago. Recently I remembered it, the shocking imagery. I'm now married, and I've realized that the woman I saw is the spitting image of my wife. Obviously she has a lower jaw, etc., but weird stuff nonetheless. You've been listening to Dead Air. Like and subscribe for more. Good night.